Part 47. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 461. Concubine Su told Shen Shuwei the secret because of her good relationship with her. She couldn't tell her about Jun Wuxian's name. After all, he had broken into the palace countless times at night, which was enough for him to die many times. Even so, she didn't want Jun Wuxian to get into trouble. Shen Shuwei was puzzled and curious. Feng Wu has a nickname. What is it? Concubine Su replied in a low voice, Xiaju. Xiaju. Shen Shuwei was stunned. This was too coincidental. Although her nickname was not Xiaju, Xiao Jinyan called her Xiaju now because she appeared in the dream. As a result, Feng Wu's nickname was also Xiaju. No, they look a bit alike. Forget it. When Xiao Jinyan comes back, don't let him call me Xiaju, just call me Weiwei. Awei. Xiao Yi. They are all so rustic. Anyway, I can't call her Xiaju, it feels like calling someone else. Shen Shuwei watched Concubine Su drinking coke and eating meat, as if she couldn't eat them after leaving the palace. Tao Lianyuan was confused. Feng Wu? Xiaju. Once Concubine Su leaves, I don't know when we will meet again. If there is any banquet in the palace, I can still follow my father or my brother into the palace, but the opportunities are too rare. Concubine Su felt a little disappointed after being proud. She didn't know if there would be 1 or 2 opportunities a year. If she married, there would be no chance. Shen Shuwei thought that she was the crown princess and would be the queen in the future. Just let Xiao Jinyan say it. It's okay, I can go out of the palace to play with you, or summon you to the palace. Concubine Su smiled when she heard it. The crown princess is right, there will always be a way. Everyone had a happy lunch. All good things must come to an end. No matter how reluctant you are, you have to say goodbye with a smile. Concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan went back together. Tao Lianyuan showed an envious look. I envy you so much that you can leave the palace. In this East Palace, apart from the crown princess, Tao Tao and Su Su, there is really nothing to remember. Concubine Su grabbed Tao Lianyuan's hand and said excitedly, then you should leave the palace too. Anyway, we don't sleep with him, and His Highness only favors the crown princess. It's a waste of time to stay alone in the palace. It's better to leave the palace and find another good man. This sentence happened to be heard by Song Qing, who was passing by. Song Qing would come to the Hehuan Palace at this time every day to teach the crown prince to practice calligraphy, write poems and songs. I didn't expect to hear the conversation between Concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan. When he went to Beijing to take the exam, he heard that the crown prince favored the crown princess alone, and he thought it was just a rumor. Now he heard it with his own ears, and he was really shocked. Concubine Su found someone behind the tree, and she shouted angrily, "Who is there?" Song Qing had no intention of eavesdropping, but now that he was discovered, he walked out openly and greeted, "Your subordinate greets Concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan." Song Qing came to teach Dao Tao every day, and Concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan knew it. Because they often came to Hehuan Palace to play, they had seen Song Qing several times and knew that he came to Hehuan Palace at this time to be on duty. Concubine Su saw that it was Song Qing, smiled and said, "It turned out to be you, I thought someone else was eavesdropping." Song Qing was embarrassed. "Your subordinate just happened to pass by." Tao Lianyuan stared at Song Qing for a while. She had met him several times and had a good impression of him. Song Qing was a scholar, full of the fragrance of literati, and the appearance of a scholar was naturally first class. "Is the third-place winner here to teach the crown prince today?" Song Qing lowered his eyebrows and eyes. "Yes." Tao Lianyuan saw that he always lowered his head, and couldn't help asking, "Why do you always lower your head when talking?" Su Concubine also stared at Song Qing curiously, and found that he did keep his head down, especially after Tao Liangyuan said that, his head was lowered even more. Raise your head and talk. Song Qing, I dare not. Tao Liangyuan covered her lips and laughed secretly. Su concubine, don't embarrass the third place winner. Su concubine said, I just want to see how handsome the third place winner is, not to eat him. I will leave the palace later, and I won't be able to see him. Song Qing. Tao Liangyuan took Su concubine's hand and said, okay, let's go. Su concubine didn't force it anymore, let's go. Song Qing lowered his head all the time, and only raised his head when they left. At this time, Tao Liangyuan looked back, and their eyes met. The former immediately lowered his head, and the latter smiled lightly, retracted his eyes and left. After a long time, Song Qing raised his head again and looked at concubine Su and Tao Liangyuan, who had already walked away. Suddenly, he felt a little sympathetic towards them. They had been alone in the empty room for so long since entering the palace, wasting their best years. At the same time, he was a little surprised that the women in the palace would do anything to win favor, but they had a good relationship with the most favored crown princess. So good that it was unbelievable. Song Qing retracted his gaze and walked into the crown prince's bedroom. Since Xiao Jinyan left, Song Qing has been teaching the crown prince's grandson in the crown prince's bedroom. As soon as concubine Su left, the Hehuan palace was less lively. Tao Liangyuan came more frequently than usual. Today, Shen Shuwei brought fruits to Dao Tao and Song Qing to taste, and took a rest by the way. Tao Liangyuan happened to come at this time, so she accompanied Shen Shuwei to the crown prince's bedroom. When they went there, Song Qing was teaching Dao Tao to write. As a third-place winner, he was not only talented in writing, but also had a good handwriting. Shen Shuwei had always been afraid that her son's childhood would become boring because of Xiao Jinyan's strictness, so she discussed with Xiao Jinyan from the beginning not to interfere in her son's childhood before the age of 5. However, like Xiao Jinyan, his son loves learning. When he was 1 year old, he liked to write and draw with a pen. She heard the queen say that Xiao Jinyan was like this when he was a child, so he was already very good at a young age. The late emperor liked Xiao Jinyan's grandson very much. Song Qing noticed Shen Shuwei's arrival and stepped forward to greet her, crown princess. Then he saw Tao Liangyuan next to Shen Shuwei and greeted him again, Tao Liangyuan. Shen Shu said in a gentle voice, I have been teaching for so long, let's take a rest and eat some fruit together. Song Qing nodded hurriedly. Shen Shuwei came to her son and took a look at the writing on the rice paper. It was written by Song Qing after being taught n times. Although it was crooked, it was pretty good for a child over 1 year old. Dao Tao's writing is great. Do you want to go out and play with your sister for a while? Dao Tao thought of her sister and nodded vigorously, yes. Shen Shuwei held her son's hand and said as they walked, I have prepared delicious food for you. You and your sister can eat together. Tao Liangyuan looked at Dao Tao, glanced down at the words on the paper, and couldn't help but praise, the emperor's grandson is so smart, he can write at just over 1 year old. Song Qing couldn't help but agree, the emperor's grandson is very talented. It is rare to be so smart at such a young age. Hearing this, Tao Liangyuan raised her head and looked at Song Qing. At this time, Song Qing did not lower her head. Their eyes met again, and both of them were shocked. Song Qing hurriedly looked away, lowered his head and closed his eyes. Tao Liangyuan was stunned for a moment and found that every time Song Qing looked at someone, she would immediately lower her head, a bit like she was embarrassed. In fact, she knew it was in awe. She asked knowingly, Tan Hualang, you seem to be afraid of me. Song Qing replied, I don't have the official. Tao Liangyuan added, if you are not afraid, then why do you always lower your head? Those who don't know think you have done something wrong. Song Qing was speechless for a moment and could only continue to lower his head. Seeing that he was silent, Tao Liangyuan took 2 steps forward and asked warmly, I heard that Tan Huolang's handwriting is so good. Would you be lucky enough to see it? Song Qing couldn't refuse, so he nodded and said, it's my honor to be a lower official. As he spoke, he walked slowly to the desk, picked up a red pen, dipped it in ink, and wrote a poem on the rice paper. Tao Liangyuan looked on and couldn't help but sigh, good calligraphy. Song Qing responded humbly, Tao Liangyuan Miao praised it. Tao Liangyuan stared at Song Qing for a while. She was really a scholar, with the smell of books all over her body. She was used to the smell of copper, but she didn't smell the slightest smell of copper on Song Qing. When Shen Chuwei and Dao Tao came out, they found that Susu, who was playing in the yard, was missing again. She looked around and found that Xiaobai had also followed, and Xue Tuan had been following Dao Tao. Could it be that Susu ran away again? P.S. Babies, please support me with monthly votes. Regarding the nickname, it can also be regarded as paving the way for the identity of the heroine. Good night, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 462. Shen Chuwei thought that her precious daughter might go out to play again, so she immediately asked someone to look for her. Qin Xiao also brought a lot of guards to look for the little princess. The East Palace is not big in the palace, but it is not small either. It still takes time to find a child over 1 year old. Beside the Tei Lake, willow branches sprouted in the spring breeze. Without Xiaobai to lead the way, Susu walked wherever she saw the road, and went wherever there was fun and beautiful. She walked slowly on the bluestone road with her 2 short legs. Xiaobai walked side by side with Susu at a leisurely pace. The beast aura on it made the cats and dogs around hide far away. Only Sichuan was not afraid of Xiaobai, who he had raised. After walking for a long time, Xiaobai suddenly walked forward a few steps, protecting Susu with its tall body, and his light blue eyes looked around vigilantly. Susu didn't know Xiaobai's intention. She continued to walk forward until she saw a person kneeling at the foot of the stone steps in the distance, and she walked over curiously. The person kneeling on the bluestone slab was Chu Lingfeng. Since he entered the palace to be Yinner's companion, he had not had enough food every day, and would beat or scold Yinner for being unhappy. Today, because the emperor praised Chu Lingfeng's beautiful handwriting, he asked Chu Lingfeng to teach Yinner well, which made Yinner feel unbalanced. After coming out of the Imperial College, he punished Chu Lingfeng to kneel for an hour without any explanation. Chu Lingfeng knew that if he didn't obey, his life would be more difficult, not to mention that he was just replacing the Prince Chu to enter the palace, and King Chunan would not care about his life or death. If you want to survive in this huge palace, you can only rely on endurance. Chu Lingfeng was wearing a thin brocade robe, and the fox fur outside was stripped by 2 young eunuchs and secretly pawned. The wind in early spring was as cold as ice chips, pouring into the collar, and the boy shivered with cold. Susu walked in front of the boy with 2 short legs. She was only a little over 1 year old and didn't know that Xiao Qiaoqiao was punishing her to kneel. She squatted down in front of Chu Lingfeng and looked at him curiously, little Qiaoqiao. Chu Lingfeng looked up at the person who came. It was a cute little girl with 2 small pigtails on her head, a peach flower between her eyebrows, and a chubby face that was particularly cute. Although he had only seen the little princess once, he recognized the little girl in front of him at a glance. She was the little princess who asked him to hold her last fall. Last year she couldn't walk, but now she can run. When he saw the tiger next to the little princess, he couldn't help but stare wide-eyed, and his body became stiff because of fear. The tiger, which was 7 or 8 months old, was stronger than the Alaskan tiger, especially when Susu fed it every day. Its snow-white fur was shiny and its body was strong. Such a ferocious beast would scare even adults to the point of weakness, let alone the 9-year-old Chu Lingfeng. Xiaobai bared his teeth at Chu Lingfeng, as if warning him not to bully the little ancestor. Even though Chu Lingfeng had experienced too much hardship and bullying, he was still scared when facing a tiger. Just as Chu Lingfeng racked his brains to leave before the tiger attacked, he saw the little princess patting Xiaobai. Hoo. Xiaobai turned his head to look at the little ancestor, and then lay down beside her obediently. Chu Lingfeng was stunned, and his cold eyes were full of disbelief. Susu touched Xiaobai's furry head, then looked at Chu Lingfeng again, tilting her head to look at him. Little pot. Chu Lingfeng saw the actions between Xiaobai and the little princess, and suddenly realized that this tiger was raised by her, so it was so obedient. Even so, he was still a little scared. As for the little princess, he just glanced at her coldly. For safety reasons, he planned to leave this place of right and wrong. It was better to go back and be punished than to lose his life at any time. Chu Lingfeng knelt for a long time, and fell to the ground again as soon as he stood up. He endured the pain and forced himself to stand up again, but this time he failed. His legs were completely frozen and numb. He sat on the ground, clenched his fists unwillingly, and kept beating his legs. Susu looked at Chu Lingfeng's series of strange movements. She stood up and reached out to hold the hand that kept beating his legs. Little Kuakuo, play. Chu Lingfeng raised his head and looked at the little princess. She was staring at him without blinking. Her eyes were purer than the sky and full of spirit. After a moment of hesitation, he shook off the little princess's hand. He didn't want to have anything to do with the royal family. Who knows if this cute little princess in front of him will be the second Yin'er. Susu looked at Chu Lingfeng in confusion, and then took out a piece of hibiscus cake from her pocket. She carefully peeled off the oil paper outside and handed it to Chu Lingfeng. Little Kuakuo, play. In Susu's eyes, little Kuakuo was unhappy. When she was unhappy, she would be happy if her mother gave her food. Little Kuakuo would play with her after eating the hibiscus cake. Chu Lingfeng looked at the lotus cake in front of him, swallowing his saliva secretly, and his stomach was very hungry. He was punished by Yin'er to kneel here and didn't have lunch, so he was already hungry. Susu saw that Chu Lingfeng didn't eat, and thought that she sometimes wanted to be fed by her mother, and thought that Xiao Kuakuo also wanted to be fed. Feed Xiao Kuakuo, Susu said, and took the lotus cake on the oil paper and handed it to Chu Lingfeng's mouth, trying to put it into his mouth. Chu Lingfeng was very hungry at this time. How could he withstand the little princess feeding him like this? He was stunned for a moment, and finally couldn't stand the hunger in his stomach, opened his mouth and bit the lotus cake. The lotus cake was more delicate than the lotus cake he had eaten before, melted in his mouth, and had a moderate sweetness. He took the lotus cake and took another bite. After a while, a piece of lotus cake was finished. Seeing this, Susu lowered her head, opened her small pocket again, took out a piece of hibiscus cake, opened the oil paper, and handed it to him again. Small pot, time. Chu Lingfeng hesitated for a while, thinking that he had already eaten one piece, so what if he had another piece? He picked up the hibiscus cake in the palm of his hand and put it into his mouth and took a bite. Before he could take a second bite, he was slapped and fell to the ground. He looked at the hibiscus cake that he had only taken a bite of. He raised his head and saw Yin'er standing in front of him, glaring at him. Who gave you permission to eat? Susu loved food the most and hated people who wasted food. Seeing the hibiscus cake being knocked to the ground made her flesh ache so much. She stood up and glared at Yin'er angrily. Nipan wo gao gao. When Yin'er saw Susu, she didn't like her at all, because Grandma said that Grandpa Huang didn't like her because of Dao Tao and Susu. I won't pay. After Yin'er roared, he felt angry and stepped on the hibiscus cake, crushing it. Susu's eyes immediately turned red when she saw that her favorite hibiscus cake was trampled to pieces and could not be eaten. Wo's cake, Ni Pei's cake. Chu Lingfeng looked at the hibiscus cake that was broken into pieces on the ground. When he heard crying, he raised his head and saw that the little princess's eyes were red from crying. Yinner snorted, "I won't pay for it and let you give him something to eat." Susu took 2 steps forward and grabbed Yinner's sleeve. "You're sorry." Yinner threw it away hard, and Susu's center of gravity was unstable, causing her to sit down on the ground. Susu was afraid of pain the most, and cried immediately when she bumped her butt. Chu Lingfeng finally couldn't bear it anymore and was about to argue with Yinner when he saw Bai, who suddenly stood up, threw Yinner to the ground, and bared his teeth as if to bite Yinner. Yinner was so frightened that he cried wow. After Chu Lingfeng was stunned for a moment, he endured the pain in his legs and stood up to help Susu up. It was particularly heartbreaking to see tears hanging on her eyebrows. He reached out his hand to wipe the tears from her cheeks. Susu cried for a while, and when she saw Xiaobai pressing Yinner, she shouted, "Hoo hoo." Xiaobai looked back at Susu, and showed a fierce look to Yinner as a warning, and then slowly returned to Susu. Chu Lingfeng looked at Baihu and was still a little scared. At the same time, he was also curious about how Baihu listened to the little princess. Susu held Chu Lingfeng's hand and walked back. "Little Guo Guo, let's play together." Chu Lingfeng saw Yinner lying on the ground crying very fiercely. If he went back today, he would inevitably have to starve and kneel down again. "I'm not going." He withdrew his hand, turned around and came to Yinner, and helped Yinner, who was still crying, up, but Yinner pushed him away hard. "Get out of here." Chu Lingfeng was holding on, but was pushed away hard. He took 2 steps back and lost his balance and fell to the ground. When Susu saw Chu Lingfeng being pushed down, she frowned and asked, "Why did you push the little pot?" Yinner said angrily, "He is not your brother." Susu said seriously, "He is Xiao Guo Guo, Guo Guo is Jia Ni." Yinner had been pampered since she was a child and always followed his wishes. When Susu retorted, he immediately became angry and pushed her to the ground. The push was a bit heavy this time, causing Susu's body to fall backwards. Seeing this, Xiaobai hurried forward and caught Susu with his body. Susu fell on Xiaobai's soft body, but even so, she was still frightened and cried. When Yinner saw the tiger, he didn't realize that it was the king of the forest at that time and a ferocious beast. He just felt that it would be great if such a big pet was his own, so that he would be more majestic when he took it out. "A girl like you doesn't need such a big pet. Give it to me and I won't push you away from now on." When Susu heard that someone wanted her, she hugged Baihu's neck and cried even harder. It's the snoring cry of the nest. "Don't choke." The emperor happened to pass by Tai Pond. He originally came to relax, but he heard a child crying. When he heard the cry, he knew it was Susu. Not to mention Susu crying, just frowning would make him extremely distressed. Who dares to bully Susu? Good evening, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. Emphasis added. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 463. Chapter 463. Susu rushed to be a reading companion, but got lost while leading the way. Eunuch Li glanced around and saw the little figure of the emperor's granddaughter in front of the stone steps not far away. Your Majesty, the emperor's granddaughter seems to be over there. The emperor looked up and saw a little red figure holding a white ball with 2 small tufts on her head. Who else could it be but Susu? The crying continued, and she cried very sadly. Susu always greeted people with a smile, and her smile was sweeter than sugar. The emperor had already imagined a long paragraph of others bullying his granddaughter, and then walked over angrily. Eunuch Li bowed and chased after her. Susu and Xiaobai grew up together, and their relationship can be said to be very good. She hugged Xiaobai tightly, fearing that Yinner would snatch him away. When the emperor came, Chu Lingfeng was the first to see him. He knelt on the ground and said, "I pay my respects to the emperor. May the emperor be blessed and safe." Yin'er realized that the emperor had come, and he was not afraid of anyone but the emperor's grandfather. Grandson pays respects to grandpa. The emperor didn't even look at Yin'er. He went straight to Susu, hugged the still crying Susu into his arms, and comforted her gently, "Baby." Susu saw grandpa and hugged grandpa's neck, crying even more sadly and aggrieved, "Grandpa." The emperor was so distressed to see his precious granddaughter crying so sadly. He took out a handkerchief to wipe the tears from Susu's cheeks. "Baby, don't cry." Susu choked twice, "Grandpa." The emperor wiped and asked, "Who bullied you? Grandpa is so distressed." Susu pointed at Yin'er and choked, "Grandpa, he stepped on the cake and choked." If it was the first time I heard Susu speak, I couldn't understand what she was saying at all. But the emperor had heard it countless times, and he could guess what his precious granddaughter was saying. Yin'er was stepping on Susu's cakes and trying to snatch Susu's white tiger. No wonder the precious granddaughter was crying so sadly, her favorite cakes were stepped on, and she must be in pain. Xiaobai is her little follower, and snatching her little follower is no different from snatching food. The emperor looked at Yin'er with anger. "Yin'er, kneel down for me." Yin'er was most afraid of the emperor grandfather. Hearing this, he knelt down immediately and did not forget to explain, "Royal grandfather, grandson did not step on my sister's cakes, grandson stepped on the cakes of Prince Chu." The emperor raised his eyes to look at Chu Lingfeng, and asked coldly, "Prince Chu, whose cakes are they?" Chu Lingfeng lowered his head. He couldn't protect himself at this time. No matter what he said, he would be beaten when he returned. "Your Majesty, it was the little princess who knew that I was hungry, so she brought the lotus cake to me, but it was crushed by Prince Yin." The emperor asked again, "Didn't you have lunch? How could you be hungry?" Chu Lingfeng said, "I didn't have lunch because I was punished to kneel." The emperor frowned, "Kneeling? Why?" Chu Lingfeng hesitated for a while, but still told the truth, "Prince Yin disdained my teaching, and made me kneel when he was unhappy." The emperor looked at Yin'er, his voice was a little deeper, "Yin'er, you are so young and don't learn well, and you are punished to kneel? He is the Prince of Chu after all. You don't treat him with courtesy. Have you learned your etiquette and rules from a dog's stomach?" Yin'er said aggrievedly, "Grandpa Emperor, your grandson doesn't want this companion. He is disobedient, and your grandson must be obedient." Susu hugged the emperor's grandfather and said in a baby voice, "Grandpa, I want Kuakuo and Ziokuakuo." The emperor would give it to his beloved granddaughter, but Yin'er, the bastard, dared to bully Susu. He was tired of living. "You are so shameless, but you still don't want it? From today on, Prince Chu will be the companion of the emperor's grandson." Susu held the emperor's face and kissed him, "Grandpa's yes yeah." The emperor was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth after being kissed by his beloved granddaughter. Chu Lingfeng didn't feel relieved when he heard this, but was more worried. Accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger, and living in the East Palace may not be better than before. "Your servant, thank you for your grace." The emperor glanced at Prince Chu, then looked at Yin'er, and ordered in a cold voice, "Yin'er has a violent heart and bullies his sister. He will be punished to kneel for an hour and copy the Analects." After saying this, the emperor carried Susu and walked towards the East Palace. Chu Lingfeng stood up and glanced at Yin'er, who was kneeling on the ground. After being bullied for so long, he felt a little relieved. He retracted his gaze and followed. Susu saw Chu Lingfeng and struggled to get down. "Grandpa, I want to get down." The emperor always responded to his granddaughter's request. He put his granddaughter down after hearing the words. Susu came to Chu Lingfeng and reached out to hold his hand, "Go home with Xiao Kuakuo." Chu Lingfeng saw the little princess' sweet smile and was reluctant to let go, but it was unreasonable. He looked up at the emperor and subconsciously wanted to take his hand back. Seeing that the emperor did not say anything, but just smiled faintly, and that smile was directed at the little princess, he suddenly stopped wanting to withdraw his hand and let the little princess hold her hand. It was said in the palace that the little princess was the emperor's treasure, and he spoiled her to an outrageous degree. Seeing her today, she was even more spoiled than the rumors. Susu happily took Xiaoqiuaqiu home, but when she reached the fork in the road where the young man met, she suddenly stopped and stared at the two roads in a daze. Chu Lingfeng also stopped and looked at the little princess in confusion, but did not ask. Xiaobai on the side stopped in tacit understanding. The emperor had been walking slowly behind, watching Susu holding the hand of Prince Chu. Why did he have the illusion that his treasure was taken away by someone? Until he saw his precious granddaughter suddenly stop, he took 2 steps forward and looked down at Susu. "Baby, why did you stop?" Susu looked at the 2 roads and forgot which one she took when she came here. In the past, Suichuan led the way in front of her, but now she didn't know how to go without anyone leading the way. "Grandpa, I'm lost." The emperor laughed when he heard this. "Do you want Grandpa to hold you?" Susu let go of Chu Lingfeng's hand and reached out for a hug. "Grandpa, hold the baby." The emperor was happy to hear this, picked up Susu, and when he reached the fork in the road, he continued to walk to the right. Chu Lingfeng looked at his hand, raised his head and looked at Susu in the emperor's arms, and smiled very happily. When concubine Yun learned that her precious grandson was punished to kneel, she trotted to the garden next to Tai Lake, and saw Yin'er kneeling there from a distance, and she was immediately distressed. She ran over, hugged Yin'er, and looked at her precious grandson with heartache. "Yin'er." When Yin'er saw his grandmother coming, he felt like he had found a backer, and cried aggrievedly, "Grandma, Yin'er's legs hurt, Yin'er doesn't want to kneel." Concubine Yun felt sorry for her grandson, but she dared not disobey the emperor's order. She raised her head and looked at Eunuch Li. "Eunuch Li, what's going on?" "Concubine Yun, Prince Yin's temper needs to change. Although Prince Chu is a companion, he is also the eldest son of King Chu Nan. How can you be so disrespectful to Prince Chu? Where does the royal family's face stand? More importantly, Prince Yin actually bullied the crown prince's daughter. The crown prince's daughter is the apple of the emperor's eye. The emperor feels distressed when she frowns. Prince Yin is still a brother, how can he bully his sister?" Eunuch Li's tone became unkind at the end. The crown prince's daughter cried so sadly. The emperor saw it and felt so distressed. The punishment of kneeling and copying the Analects is already a light punishment. Kneeling for an hour, copying the Analects is a light punishment? Concubine Yun just felt sorry for Yin'er when she heard it, and did not realize what her grandson did wrong. She just felt unlucky to be seen by the emperor with his own eyes. Asterisk. Shen Chuwei searched the entire eastern palace, but did not find Susu, so she guessed that she must have sneaked out of the eastern palace. Just when she was about to go out to look for her, she saw the emperor holding Susu back, and she was secretly relieved. Sure enough, she ran away. She stepped forward and bowed. "Your son greets the emperor, may the emperor be blessed with good health." "Get up," the emperor said as he walked in with Susu in his arms. Shen Chuwei was about to follow him when she found a young man following behind the emperor. He was handsome and had a cool temperament. Nowadays, children are amazing. They are so beautiful at such a young age. Chu Lingfeng took 2 steps forward and bowed. "Your son greets the crown princess." The sudden greeting made Shen Chuwei stunned for a moment. She was a little curious about who the young man in front of her was. "Good night, babies. Monday, please vote for the monthly ticket and recommendation ticket. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 464. Chapter 464, Too Doting, Bullying Tenhua for Being Too Honest. Dao Tao was eating diced fruit on the couch. When he saw Grandpa Huang and his sister walking in, he got off the couch neatly and saluted. Grandpa, Jinan. Ever since Song Qing began to teach Dao Tao, the first thing to do was etiquette, because the royal family paid the most attention to etiquette and rules. The emperor sat down on the couch with Susu in his arms and watched Dao Tao salute gracefully. Her serious appearance was very similar to that of the prince when he was a child. Dao Tao, get up quickly and come to me. Dao Tao walked up to Grandpa Huang with her short legs. When Susu saw the diced fruits for dessert on the low table, she got off Grandpa Huang and sat on the couch. She picked up a piece of jujube paste cake with her little hand and put it into her mouth and took a bite. The emperor often hugged Susu, but his grandson seldom hugged him, because every time he hugged Susu, there was no room for him. This time, when Susu was not in his arms, he made room. Come, Grandpa Huang, give me a hug. When the emperor picked up Dao Tao, he was stunned for a moment. Because Dao Tao is his elder brother, he should be heavier than Susu, but he found that Dao Tao is lighter than Susu. He turned his head to look at Susu and saw that she was holding jujube cake in one hand and a spoon in the other, taking one mouthful after another, her mouth never stopping since she sat down. It's so edible, it's not impossible to weigh more than my brother. Shen Chuwei followed the emperor into the house and saw the emperor holding Dao Tao and Susu, a snack food, eating cakes. Chu Lingfeng then came in and stood in an inconspicuous position, trying to make people ignore him. The emperor raised his head and glanced at Chu Lingfeng. He stood quietly in the corner. He was calm, and he had a sense of nobility. He was worthy of being the eldest son of King Chunan. Princess, this is the eldest son of King Chunan, Chu Lingfeng, the crown prince of Chu, and he will start reading to Dao Tao today. Shen Chu turned his head slightly and looked at Chu Lingfeng. It turned out to be Prince Chu. No wonder he had a cool nobility. The key was that he was beautiful. Dao Tao will inevitably be lonely when studying alone. My father has arranged it very well. Chu Lingfeng looked at the little princess and the emperor's grandson. How lonely is she with such a lovely sister? What Chu Lingfeng didn't know was that the emperor and empress doted on Susu. It didn't matter whether she was talented or not. What was important was that Susu was happy. It didn't matter if she wanted to learn or not. When she is older, it will not be too late to learn. As a salty fish, Shen Chuwei would naturally not force her daughter to be proficient in all kinds of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. It was not bad to be a little salty fish. The emperor hugged Dao Tao for a while and then put Dao Tao back on the couch and continued eating diced fruit. Susu stood up holding onto the low table, holding a piece of jujube paste cake in each hand, and handed it to Grandpa Wang's mouth, saying in a sweet voice, "Grandpa, this cake is cake." The emperor looked at the pastry in front of him. He reached out to take it, raised his head and looked at Susu with a doting smile on his face. The baby also knows how to get food for Grandpa Huang. After delivering the cakes, Susu got off the couch neatly, came to Chu Lingfeng with the jujube paste cakes, and raised the cakes in her hand to him. Small pot, second cake, good second. Chu Lingfeng looked at the jujube cake in front of him, and then saw the little princess looking at him with a smile on her face, but he did not dare to pick it up. At this time, my stomach growled unsatisfactorily. Chu Lingfeng was embarrassed. Shen Chu reminded him in a gentle voice, "Prince Chu, Susu's hands are almost sore." Chu Lingfeng raised his head and glanced at the princess before taking the cake from the little princess's hand. Susu saw Chu Lingfeng take it, and then happily threw herself into Grandpa Wang's arms. "Grandpa, hold the baby." Susu was usually very good at climbing on the couch to eat, but today Grandpa Huang was here, so she was too lazy to crawl by herself. Every time the emperor heard his precious granddaughter talking about holding a baby, He felt extremely soft-hearted. He picked up Susu with a smile and put her on the couch. Grandpa Crab, after Susu sat down, she couldn't wait to continue eating the diced fruit. The Emperor did not stay long and played with Susu for a while before leaving. As Dao Tao's companion, Chu Lingfeng originally did not need to live in Hehuan Hall. For convenience, so he stayed in Hehuan Hall just like he did when he was Yinner's companion before. Shen Shuwei asked someone to clean up a room and come out. The bedding and everything were new. Chu Lingfeng followed Shen Shuwei into his new residence and was stunned for a moment when he saw the brand new bedding inside. Shen Chu glanced at the room slightly. It was not much different from Dao Tao's room, and the furnishings were similar. It was the first time for Chu Lingfeng to come here. He was very unfamiliar and cautious, so she understood better. Chu Shizi, if you need anything, just ask Chengzi and she will prepare it for you. Chu Lingfeng came back to her senses, raised her head and looked at the Crown Princess, then remembered to bow and salute. Thank you, Crown Princess. Shen Shuwei said again, where is your entourage? I will ask him to take him to the side room and get familiar with the environment. Chu Lingfeng paused after hearing this, and then replied after a long time, he is no longer here. Shen Chu was stunned for a moment, gone. It was only later that I realized that the person was gone. Seeing that Chu Lingfeng was unwilling to say more, she didn't ask any more questions. I will make some arrangements for you later. You can choose a suitable follower for yourself. As the Crown Prince of Chu, you cannot live without a follower who can take care of your daily life. Chu Lingfeng nodded and thanked. Shen Shuwei stared at Chu Lingfeng for a while, then turned around and walked out. After they were far away, Shen Shuwei ordered, Chengzi, you go to the House of Internal Affairs later and ask them to send a few people over so that Prince Chu can pick one. Chengzi nodded and said, I will go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs now. Shen Shuwei ordered again, young Master Chu has just arrived, so he will definitely be a little cautious. Please take the initiative to ask about your daily needs. Chengzi nodded, I will remember it. Not long after Chengzi went to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, father-in-law Quan brought 3 young eunuchs who were about 15 years old. Eunuch Quan said with a smile, Prince Chu, they have all just entered the palace. They are obedient. You can choose them yourself. Prince Chu glanced at the 3 people in front of him. They were of different heights. His eyes finally fell on the little eunuch on the far right. He was thin and delicate in appearance. He raised his hand and pointed, just you. The chosen eunuch was Yuan Bao. He didn't expect that he would be chosen and was stunned for a moment. On the way here, both of them were afraid that Prince Chu would choose them, because Prince Chu was just a proton and had no future. They said he was lucky, and being so thin, he would definitely not be selected. What are you doing standing there in a daze? Why don't you please pay your respects to Prince Chu? After Yuan Bao reacted, he immediately knelt on the ground and acknowledged his master. Slave Yuan Bao pays his respects to the master. Chu Lingfeng said calmly, get up. Then the Xie family will go back first. Eunuch Quan took them back with a smile. The 2 people who were not selected secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they were not selected, otherwise they would have lost their chance to succeed. After Chengzi saw that Prince Chu had made his choice, he turned around and left. Shen Shuwei was sitting on the couch, cracking melon seeds, and saw Chun 11 walking in. How's it going? Master, Prince Chu has already chosen his entourage, Chengzi said as she walked over, picked up the teapot, poured a cup of tea, and placed it in front of Shen Shuwei. Master, Prince Chu doesn't seem to talk much. Shen Chu picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Maybe it's introversion, and since I just came to a strange place, it will get better over time. Chengzi smiled and nodded, yes, but this way, Dao Tao will have company when she studies. Princess Tao Liangyuan walked in slowly with a smile. After concubine Su left the palace, Tao Lianyuan came very frequently, almost every day. Shen Shuwei waved to Tao Lianyuan, come and eat melon seeds. After Tao Lianyuan sat down, she grabbed a handful of paws and started to knead them. Princess, I heard that Dao Tao has a companion to study with. Is it true? Shen Chu nodded slightly, it's Prince Chu, a very beautiful boy. Tao Lianyuan asked with a gossipy face, how beautiful is she? Shen Chuwei couldn't describe the little boy for a while. She thought for a while and said, the appearance is about the same as Dao Tao, but he is slimmer than Dao Tao. He is a very polite boy. You said that, I'm a little curious. Tao Lianyuan cracked a melon seed and looked at Shen Chuwei with a smile, Princess, let's go over and have a look. Shen Chuwei agreed readily, okay. Putting down the melon seeds, the two of them went to the prince's bedroom next door. As soon as he approached the study, he heard Song Qing's warm voice. Chu Shizi, this poem is good. Mr. Song is overly complimentary. Dao Tao is also very powerful. Tao Lianyuan walked to the door, looked inside, and saw Song Qing wearing a moon-white robe, with a white jade belt around his waist, which made him tall and thin. Shen Chuwei also came over, his eyes fell on Chu Lingfeng, and he bumped Tao Lianyuan's arm with his elbow. Did you see that beautiful young man is the Prince of Chu? Oh, Tao Lianyuan reacted and moved her eyes from Song Qing to the young man in front of him. The young man was only 8 or 9 years old. He was thin and his face was very pretty. I saw it, it's very beautiful, Tao Lianyuan said, looking at Song Qing again. Song Qing put down the book in his hand and said, Prince Chu, take the emperor's grandson out to play for a while, take a rest, and then continue. Yes, Mr. Song. Chu Lingfeng walked out with Dao Tao. When he saw the crown princess, he stepped forward and saluted, I give my regards to the crown princess. Dao Tao happily threw herself into Shen Chuwei's arms, mother concubine. Dao Tao Shen Chuwei knelt down in front of his son and saw that his white and tender hands were stained with a lot of ink. I will take you to wash your hands and eat something. She held her son's hand and stood up, looking down at Chu Lingfeng. Chu Shizi, you also go to wash your hands and eat something. Chu Lingfeng nodded and followed the princess to wash her hands. Before leaving, Shen Chuwei said to Tao Lianyuan, you play for a while, I'll be back soon. Tao Lianyuan said, go and do your work, don't worry about me. After Shen Chuwei and the others walked away, Tao Lianyuan looked into the study. Song Qing was sitting in front of the desk reading, and she walked in. Tan Hualang, what are you reading? After hearing this, Song Qing raised his head and saw Tao Lianyuan. He quickly put down the book in his hand, stood up and saluted, Tao Lianyuan. Tao Lianyuan walked over slowly, picked up the book Song Qing had just read, and glanced at the content. Thinking of the book she was reading, she suddenly raised the corners of her lips. Tan Hualang, I have a book here, do you want to read it? Song Qing lowered his head and closed his eyes, I like to read books. If I haven't read it before, I will naturally want to read it. Good night. As a spoiler, there will be more supporting roles in these 2 days, because the rest will be starring roles. The heroine will leave the palace and reveal her life experience. The latest updates are 2 chapters a day, and 1 chapter is about 3,000 words. I am not lazy. Compared with others, 4,000 words a day is already a lot. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 465. Chapter 465. After reading the romance novel, the top scholar was stunned. Song Qing was well read and had read all kinds of books. He also loved reading, so he didn't think much about it. Tao Lianyuan looked at Song Qing and lowered his head again, but from his tone, he should be looking forward to it. I will bring the book when I come to play tomorrow. Song Qing said, thank you, Tao Lianyuan. Tao Lianyuan imagined that if Song Qing knew it was a storybook, would he still be so excited? Maybe he would be shocked and think it was ridiculous. Just thinking about Song Qing's reaction, she couldn't help laughing. "Mr. Song, how about you teach me to write?" Song Qing was very frightened when he heard this. "Tao Lianyuan, I'm afraid this is not appropriate." Tao Lianyuan pretended to be innocent. "What's wrong?" Song Qing lowered his head even lower. "There is a difference between men and women, it is indeed inappropriate." Tao Lianyuan laughed when she heard this. "Mr. Song is knowledgeable and polite, it is indeed a bit inappropriate, I was too careless." Song Qing secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Tao Lianyuan is also eager to learn. "If you really want to learn, you can find another teacher." Tao Lianyuan said with some distress, "I want to learn because I like Mr. Song's calligraphy. If I change someone, I don't want to learn." Song Qing. Tao Lianyuan didn't embarrass him, and lowered her head to look at the book Song Qing had just read. The next day, Tao Lianyuan brought the book that she liked more to the Hehuan Palace. It was unreasonable to go to Song Qing alone, so she took Shen Chuwei to see Dao Tao and went to the prince's bedroom. Song Qing is a gentle and elegant Tanhualang, with a strong bookish aura on him, and he is also very honest. Tao Lianyuan spent money to find out a lot about the Tanhualang. She heard that before he went to Beijing to take the exam, many people came to his house to be a matchmaker, but he was too focused on reading and wanted to get a good name. After he entered the top 3 and became a Tanhualang, countless people came to his house to be a matchmaker, but they felt that he was still young and was not in a hurry to get married. Even the Shangshu wanted to marry his daughter to him, but he declined. Tao Lianyuan was also curious about what kind of woman he liked. When Song Qing saw that it was Tao Lianyuan who came in, he stepped forward and bowed. "Tao Lianyuan." Tao Lianyuan handed the storybook to Song Qing. "This is my favorite book, take a look." "Thank you." Tao Lianyuan. Song Qing stretched out his hands to take the book from Tao Lianyuan's hand, but accidentally touched a warm and soft hand, which scared him so much that he quickly withdrew his hands, causing the book to fall to the ground. Tao Lianyuan pretended to be frightened. "Mr. Song, what's wrong with you?" I'm fine." Song Qing didn't dare to look at Tao Lianyuan, bent down to pick up the book on the ground, patted the dust on the book, and wiped off the invisible fine dust on it with his sleeve. Tao Lianyuan saw that Song Qing's ears were red, and she was stunned for a long time. It was the first time she saw such a pure man. Maybe it was because he read too many storybooks, and his thoughts changed a lot. Looking at his actions, you can tell at a glance that he is a book lover. Just touching his hand just now scared him like that. Could it be that he has never touched a woman? After wiping the book clean, Song Qing bowed again. "Thank you Tao Lianyuan, I will read it carefully and then return the book to Tao Lianyuan." Tao Lianyuan said indifferently, "If Mr. Song likes it, you can keep it for yourself and read it when you go back. After reading it, tell me what is written in it." Song Qing loves reading and collecting. If he likes it, it is naturally good to keep it. "Then thank you, Tao Lianyuan." "Mr. Song is so polite." Tao Lianyuan looked at Song Qing's expression of love, and looked forward to his reaction after seeing the content. She wondered if he would be scared. Shen Chuwei brought her son back and saw Song Qing and Tao Lianyuan in the study. She didn't think much and put a plate of grilled chicken wings in front of them. "This is cola chicken wings, you try it?" When Shen Chuwei came in, Tao Lianyuan smelled the fragrance. Now she saw the origin of the fragrance and was a little greedy. "It smells so good." She took the oil paper unceremoniously, and then used the oil paper to pick up the chicken wings, so that her hands would not be dirty. She put it in her mouth and took a bite, and praised generously, "Crown Princess, this is delicious." Shen Chuwei was quite proud. "Of course, it's one of my favorite delicacies." While speaking, she took the oil paper and wrapped one for her daughter, then wrapped another for her son, and then gave it to Chu Lingfeng. Chu Lingfeng hesitated for a while, but still took it and took a small bite. Seeing Song Qing standing still, Tao Liangyuan reminded him, "Mr. Song, you should eat too." Song Qing watched them eating with relish, and was also a little curious about the taste of the cola chicken wings, but he had not forgotten his identity. "This is not reasonable." "What's reasonable or not? Try it. It's a delicacy made by the crown princess." "It would be a pity not to eat it," Tao Liangyuan said as she wrapped one for Song Qing in oil paper. When putting it into Song Qing's hand, their hands touched again. This time it was not shock, but embarrassment. As expected, his ears turned red again. Tao Liangyuan saw it. It's really rare to see a man who is so easily shy. Shen Chuwei also picked up a piece of cola chicken wing and took a bite. The meat was tender and delicious. A group of people ate cola chicken wings around the desk. After a while, a plate of chicken wings was gone. It was the first time for Song Qing to eat like this. It was a bit unsightly, but when he saw the crown princess, Tao Liangyuan, and Prince Chu eating like this, it seemed normal. Chu Lingfeng used to be hungry often, so he was not surprised to see him eating with his hands while standing. Instead, he was used to it. After eating the cola chicken wings, Susu pulled Chu Lingfeng's hand. "Little Kuakuo, let's play together." Chu Lingfeng is now in the East Palace. The little princess wants him to accompany her, so he will naturally not refuse. "What do you want to play?" Susu pointed to the small ball next to Xiaobai. "Play ball." Chu Lingfeng looked up at the white tiger, only to see that the white tiger was walking towards him. He subconsciously wanted to step back. Even if the tiger is not showing its power, it is very scary. Chu Lingfeng is still a 9-year-old child, and it is impossible to say that he is not afraid. He really doesn't understand why the emperor and the crown princess gave the white tiger to the little princess as a pet. Susu waved happily at the white tiger. "Hoo-hoo." The white tiger saw Susu waving and ran over excitedly. Chu Lingfeng subconsciously stepped back several steps. Susu looked up at Chu Lingfeng in confusion. "Little Kuakuo, won't you play with me?" Chu Lingfeng still hesitated when he saw Beihu. "I'll play with you." Susu held Chu Lingfeng's hand again, and after watching Beihu come over, she touched Beihu. "Hoo-hoo." Chu Lingfeng watched Beihu standing docilely in front of the little princess, allowing her to touch him. He only hoped that Beihu would always be so obedient. If he went crazy, he would not be able to save the little princess, and even his own life would be in vain. Chu Lingfeng played ball with the little princess for a while in fear. Every time he saw Beihu running towards him, he felt the danger of being pounced on by Beihu in the next second. Susu had a lot of fun, and her smile was sweeter than cotton candy. Chu Lingfeng was stunned for a few seconds when he saw Susu laughing. In the dead of night, Song Qing, who had been busy all day, came to the bed after taking a bath and sat down. Thinking of the book that Tao Liangyuan gave him, he was not sleepy at the moment, so he got up and took it out and sat at the head of the bed to read it. There were a few candles burning in the room, but the light was still dim. He lit another candle and placed it next to the bed, then sat on the bed, picked up the book and opened it to read. The content on the first page was very different from the books he had read before, and it seemed to be a story. He continued to read with curiosity, and after reading a few pages, he found something wrong, a bit like a folk story book, but also a little different from a story book. The story was quite attractive, so he continued to read, and found that the atmosphere was getting more and more wrong. Good night. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 466. Chapter 466 Too explosive, you'll never see it again. After reading the first two sentences, Song Ching thought it was a landscape book. After reading the first page, he realized it was a tragic story. When he saw the heroine being forced to make love when she was reborn, he couldn't hold it back. Song Ching read books of sages. Where had he seen such an explosive article? He blushed, closed the book, and stared at the candlelight for a long time. Did Tao Liangyuan take the wrong book? But this book was indeed given to him by Tao Liangyuan. Tao Liangyuan read this kind of book? Song Ching's eyes widened, he glanced at the cover. There was a carved window on it, and 3 words were written on the right side, "Wild geese return in spring." He thought he might have made a mistake. How could Tao Liangyuan read this kind of book? There was nothing wrong with the title of the book. Song Ching put the book back on the table, then pulled up the quilt to sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw the scene in the book where the emperor kissed his favorite concubine. Song Ching, who had never experienced love, saw such a detailed description, and Bai Jing's cheeks turned red again. Song Ching is 19 years old this year. Although he has never experienced it, it does not mean that he does not understand anything. If he does not understand at the age of 19, he must be pretending. It's just that Song Ching thinks that men should establish a career before starting a family. If he is focused on his career, he will ignore this aspect. It is inevitable to be a little excited when he suddenly sees such an exciting passage. Song Ching did not sleep well that night. After getting dressed, he lowered his eyes to look at the book The Return of the Wild Goose in Spring and picked it up to return it to Tao Liangyuan. But thinking about the content in the book, if it was wrong, would Tao Liangyuan be embarrassed? After thinking for a long time, he put the book on the innermost shelf and then took a carriage into the palace. In the spring after the rain, the buds on the willow branches grow fast. Susu held a section of willow branches in her hand and staggered to the door of Kuakuo. When she found that Kuakuo had not gotten up yet, she staggered to the door of Xiao Kuakuo again. When Yuanbao came out with the wash basin, he saw the little princess in the garden and was about to go forward to pay his respects, but when he saw the tiger behind the little princess, his legs went limp with fear. Old tiger. Yuanbao was a newcomer and didn't know that the little princess's pet was a tiger. It was inevitable that he would be paralyzed by fear when he first saw such a ferocious beast as a tiger. Susu turned her head to look at the white tiger. Thinking of Yin'er trying to steal her white tiger, she hurriedly stretched out her arms to hug the white tiger to swear possession. It's hoo-hoo, whoa-hoo-hoo. Yuanbao's heartbeat almost stopped when he saw the little princess hugging the white tiger. He opened his eyes wide and found that the white tiger did not show a fierce expression, nor did it want to eat people. But he was still a little scared when he saw the white tiger. Susu didn't know that Yuanbao couldn't say a word because he was afraid of the white tiger. Seeing that Yuanbao ignored her, she let go of the white tiger and walked in with her 2 short legs. Arriving at the door, Susu leaned against the door frame and looked inside. She saw Xiao Kuakuo sitting at the dining table eating. She could smell the fragrance even standing at the door. Xiao Kuakuo. Chu Lingfen looked sideways in a gentle voice and saw the little princess standing at the door, followed by Beihu. He stood up quickly and said, "Little princess." When he arrived at the door, he reached out to hold Susu's hand and brought her in. Susu followed Xiao Kuakuo to the dining table, tiptoed to look at the dish of meat buns on the table, and said in a baby voice, "Xiao Kuakuo, I want some buns." Chu Lingfen was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Buns. He glanced at the meat buns and found that the little princess was staring at them, so he picked up Susu and put her on the chair, then picked up the chopsticks and picked up a meat bun and put it in the bowl and dish, and then put it in front of the little princess. Yes, Xiao Kuakuo. After Susu thanked him, she took the meat bun and put it in her mouth and took a bite. The meat bun had a thin skin and a lot of stuffing. She ate the meat inside in one bite, and her eyebrows curved with joy. Chu Lingfeng found that the little princess liked to laugh, and her smile was pure. Holding her in his arms was like holding a ball of cotton candy, soft and sweet. Chu Lingfeng was stunned for a moment, then sat down and ate slowly. Susu puffed up her cheeks and pointed at the meat buns on the plate and said, "Xiaoqiuaqiu, this bun too." Yet Chu Lingfeng picked up a meat bun and put it in his mouth, took a small bite, and ate slowly. Susu saw that Xiaoqiuaqiu had also eaten, and happily continued to eat the meat bun in her hand. Outside the door, Beihu lay at the door, his light blue eyes looking around vigilantly. Yuan Bao held the wash basin and looked at Beihu, so scared that he dared not move. Since Xiao Jinyan left, Shen Shui's sleep time has been advanced, because no one tormented her at night. After washing up, she came to the dining table, only saw Dao Tao sitting there but not Susu, and doubt flashed in her eyes. "Dao Tao, where is your sister?" Dao Tao shook her head, "I don't know. Susu is greedy and is always more active than anyone else at meals. There is no reason for her to be late. Did she go out to eat and drink for free? Little rabbit, go out and look for her to see if she is playing somewhere." Yes, the little rabbit went out to find someone. Just as Shen Shui was about to go out, she saw Chu Lingfeng leading Susu in, and Susu was holding a meat bun in her hand and eating it with relish. Chu Lingfeng took 2 steps forward to greet him. "I pay my respects to the crown princess." Shen Shui breathed a sigh of relief. "Get up." Susu trotted over and threw herself into her mother's arms. "Mom, there are buns and meat." Shen Shui looked at her baby daughter with greasy hands, and helplessly carried her to the dining chair. "I knew you must have gone out to eat and drink for free." Susu's eyebrows curved. "Little Qiuaqiu, what's wrong?" Shen Shui raised her head and looked at Chu Lingfeng, asking in a gentle voice, "Does Prince Chu want to eat some more together?" Chu Lingfeng lowered his eyebrows and closed his eyes. "Thank you, Princess, I'm full." "Then sit down and talk first." "Thank you, Princess." Shen Shui was already hungry at this time. She picked up the meat bun in front of her and stuffed it into her mouth. The soup was rich and fragrant. Chu Lingfeng sat on a chair beside her and watched the princess take the meat bun with her hands and bite it directly. Yes, she bit it with a big mouthful, which was not in line with the princess's temperament at all. He was stunned. Looking at the crown prince again, he saw him holding the meat bun with both hands and eating it slowly and leisurely. Then he looked at the little princess again, holding the meat bun in one hand and biting it directly. This move was very much like the princess. The scene in front of him was completely different from what he imagined. When Tao Liangyuan came, Chu Lingfeng had already taken Dao Tao to the next bedroom to study. Susu was learning to ride a horse in the yard, which was actually riding on the white tiger. She didn't have to walk wherever the white tiger carried her. She was very much like Shen Shui in this aspect of laziness. Shen Shui saw Tao Liangyuan's smiling face and asked curiously, "What happy event did you encounter?" "No happy event, I'm just a little curious about Mr. Song's reaction today." Tao Liangyuan just imagined Song Qing's innocent and handsome face, and couldn't help laughing again. Shen Shui was confused. "Mr. Song's reaction? What reaction?" Tao Liangyuan leaned close to Shen Shui's ear and whispered, "I gave him Wild Goose Returns yesterday and asked him to go back and read it." Wild Goose Returns? Shen Shui's eyes widened. "Isn't that a book of forced love? Men don't like to read this, right?" Tao Liangyuan suppressed her laughter and said, "Of course I know men don't like to read it. Song Qing is devoted to reading sage books. It's good to change his taste and wake up his mind occasionally." Shen Shui met Song Qing countless times. When getting along with him, she felt that Song Qing was a very gentle and polite man. His every move was full of the bookish atmosphere of literati and poets. He grasped the etiquette and rules very accurately and never crossed the line. Are you afraid that a third-place winner who only reads sage books will be angry when you show him such a revealing book? Tao Lianyuan was stunned when she heard this. She didn't think so much at the time. She just wanted to tease Song Cheng. I don't know. If you get angry, I'll say I took the wrong thing. However, Song Cheng is a man, so his ability to accept should be better than ours. Shen Shuwei. Even if Song Cheng is a man, he is a pure ancient man, and he is also a scholar who only reads books of sages. If he is a playboy, he is really nothing. Compared with a certain spring picture, Yan Chengyi is just a small witch meeting a big witch. Yan Chengyi just brushed past it. Tao Lianyuan hugged Shen Shuwei's arm. Crown Princess, let's go see Song Cheng and see how he reacts. Shen Shuwei was also a little curious, so she nodded, okay. Shen Shuwei and Tao Lianyuan came to the study next door and heard Song Cheng's gentle voice from a distance. Tao Lianyuan stood outside the door and looked inside. The first person she saw was Song Cheng. He was wearing a green brocade robe today, with a moon-white waist belt tied around his waist. Zhilan Yushu, gentle and elegant, is the most suitable description for Song Cheng. Shen Shuwei glanced inside for a few times and whispered to Tao Lianyuan, is Song Cheng very handsome? Tao Lianyuan replied without thinking, well, he is naturally handsome to be able to become the third place in the imperial examination, but he is a little innocent. Speaking of innocence, I think of how innocent concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan were, but they were led astray by her. The culprit is the bunch of romance novels. Otherwise, how could concubine Su and Tao Lianyuan have such unrestrained thoughts? Shen Shuwei said, Song Cheng is well educated and handsome, and he is the best choice to be a son-in-law. Tao Lianyuan was a little indignant, the emperor's sisters are old, isn't that an old cow eating young grass? Shen Shuwei said with some regret, so the emperor didn't give birth to a princess, it's a pity. Fortunately, he didn't give birth to a princess. Tao Lianyuan said very quietly, but Shen Shuwei still heard it. If the emperor had a princess, Song Cheng, the son-in-law, would not be able to escape. Shen Shuwei added, I heard that the Prime Minister, the Minister of Rights and the Minister of Rights all want to recruit Song Cheng as their son-in-law. Tao Lianyuan couldn't help but tighten her handkerchief when she heard this. It would be hard for a man as outstanding as Song Cheng not to be popular. She sighed to herself, it will be even harder to pursue him. Shen Shuwei came over with a gossipy face as if she had discovered some explosive news, are you interested in Song Cheng? Tao Lianyuan blushed and looked back at Shen Shuwei. This secret could only be told to Shen Shuwei. She nodded shyly. When she saw Song Cheng for the first time, she had a good impression of him, so when concubine Su asked her to leave the palace, she didn't think about it, but she didn't want to leave the palace for the time being. Because it would not be so easy to see Song Cheng often after leaving the palace. As a modern person, Shen Shuwei's first reaction was, then what are you waiting for? Chase him, it will be too late to have a chance. Good evening, babies. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 467. Shen Shuwei found that what she said was a little unrealistic after she finished speaking. Tao Lianyuan is still Xiao Jinyan's concubine. It's okay if no one finds out that she openly pursues Song Cheng in the East Palace. If she is discovered, it will ruin the reputation of both of them. Song Cheng is a newly promoted third-place winner, a well-educated and well-mannered scholar. Even if he has a good impression of Tao Lianyuan, he will not cross the line. The only way is to leave the palace. Leaving the palace means being free, and the chance of success is greater if you pursue boldly. Tao Lianyuan sighed. Of course, he knew that the newly promoted third-place winner was hot, and if it was too late, he would be snatched away by others. But how can she pursue him with her current identity? Tao Lianjiayuan's eyes fell on Song Qing, and she was a little helpless. He and I are destined to be incompatible. We met by chance, but we are not destined to be together. Shen Shuwei suggested, why don't you leave the palace too? After leaving the palace, you can take the initiative to pursue him. It's easy for a woman to pursue a man. The chance of success is very high. A pure man like Song Qing is easy to conquer. Shen Shuwei did not forget to cheer him up at the end. But after leaving the palace, it will be difficult for me to see Song Qing. Tao Lianyuan said with some sorrow. It is a good thing to be able to pursue openly. Song Qing is a well-educated and well-mannered person, so he will not do anything out of line. Shen Shuwei was a little anxious for Tao Lianyuan. She suddenly thought of concubine Su. Oh no, it should be Su Qing, and her black-clad man didn't know when to come back to see her. She naturally hoped that Tao Lianyuan and Su Qing would have a perfect home. It was finally time for Tao Tao to rest. Shen Shuwei leaned close to Tao Lianjiayuan's ear and said, seize the opportunity. As she said that, she took her son away and called Chu Lingfeng to come over to give Tao Lianyuan some space and time. Tao Lianyuan looked at Shen Shuwei gratefully. After they walked away, she looked at Song Qing in the study and found that he was reading all day long. Even if he was resting for a while, he would still read instead of drinking tea. Tao Lianyuan walked to the desk with courage and looked at the book in Song Qing's hand. Although she only saw 2 sentences, she guessed that a scholar like him would only read the books of sages. Mr. Song. Song Qing raised his head and saw Tao Lianyuan standing in front of him. He quickly put down the book and stood up to greet him, Tao Lianyuan. Tao Lianyuan looked at Song Qing, who lowered his eyebrows and nodded, saying that he was well-educated and well-mannered, and he would never forget the rules of etiquette. Mr. Song, don't be so reserved. Although I am the concubine of the prince now, I will not be in a few days. Song Qing was stunned for a moment. Tao Lianyuan said again, Mr. Song should have heard about Miss Su's departure from the palace. I will also leave the palace in a few days. Song Qing was a little embarrassed when he heard this. Tao Lianyuan, last time, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Tao Lianyuan smiled lightly, I know that Mr. Song is a gentleman, how could he eavesdrop on others? Song Qing secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but Tao Lianjiayuan's next words made him embarrassed again. Have you read the book I sent to Mr. Song yesterday? Song Qing lied for the first time in his life, I was too busy yesterday and didn't have time to read it. Tao Lianyuan saw that Song Qing's ears were red again. Was he shy? I thought you had read it, so it's a good opportunity to discuss the contents of the book. Tao Lianyuan sent the book Wild Geese Return in Spring. I will definitely read it when I have time. Song Qing deliberately emphasized his tone, in order to remind Tao Lianyuan that he sent the wrong book, so that he could return the book naturally. Tao Lianyuan said happily, that's good, after Mr. Song has read it, we can discuss the contents of the book together. Song Qing was stunned when he heard this. Didn't he send the wrong book? The rest time was enough. Song Qing continued to teach Dao Tao and Prince Chu. Tao Lianyuan didn't disturb Song Qing inside, but stood at the door, looking at Song Qing, who was full of bookish aura, making people feel very comfortable. Shen Shuwei came over curiously, how is it? What's his reaction? He said he hasn't read it yet, but I saw his ears turn red, he must be embarrassed. Tao Lianjiayuan's eyes never left Song Qing when she spoke. Although Song Qing was teaching the crown prince, he couldn't ignore the 2 eyes outside the door, and he didn't know what they were reading. He could only try his best to pretend not to see it. Song's house. After taking a bath, Song Qing thought of the book, and then went to the bookshelf and took out the book The Return of Wild Goose in Spring. He hadn't read it for several days. It was not that he had forgotten it, but Tao Lianyuan appeared in front of him every day, and it was hard to forget it. He hesitated for a long time, took the book to bed, but didn't open it. Folk stories were sung by actors in various ways, almost all of which were about rich girls and scholars. This was the first time he had seen a storybook about the emperor and a woman. In fact, the story at the beginning was very tragic and desolate. After rebirth, people looked forward to what would happen next. Such an explicit clip appeared. Song Ching hesitated for a long time, but still opened the storybook and continued to read. People are curious creatures. After reading books of sages, it is inevitable to be curious when suddenly reading a different book. Song Ching felt that the description of kissing was so detailed and delicate that it was already explicit enough. Although the plot of sex was only mentioned in a few words, it still made people blush and their hearts beat fast. The story was not long, and it took him an hour and a half to finish it. Although there were descriptions of kissing and sex in it, the story was well written. Compared with folk stories, it can be said to be very exciting. Unlike the poetry collections he had read before, this book left a strong aftertaste after reading it, and it also made him realize that feelings can sometimes be so passionate and crazy, and at the same time, it can also make people very humble. It was late at night when Song Ching finished reading The Return of the Wild Goose in Spring. He put the book on the table and suddenly realized that Tao Lianyuan might not have sent the wrong book. For several days, every time Tao Lianyuan came to the study, Song Ching felt guilty, fearing that Tao Lianyuan would ask him if he had finished reading the book. Although he had read it, how could such a book be discussed? Tao Lianyuan did not intend to really discuss the book with Song Ching. She just wanted Song Ching, who only read the books of saints, to read some different books to brainwash him. Tao Lianyuan, help me send this plate of cakes to Mr. Song. Shen Chuwei brought a plate of cakes and stuffed it into Tao Lianyuan's hand, with the purpose of buying some time and opportunities for Tao Lianyuan and Song Ching. Tao Lianyuan took the cakes, looked at Shen Chuwei gratefully, and walked in. Shen Chuwei watched Tao Lianyuan walk in. After so many days, there was no progress at all. The frog in the warm water was too slow. The ministers outside were staring at Song Ching, and Song Ching was now Dao Tao's enlightenment teacher, so they all wanted to get close to him. When Tao Lianyuan came in, Song Ching bowed as usual. Mr. Song, try the cakes. Song Ching looked at the exquisite and delicious cakes in front of him. The thing that was most abundant in the East Palace was probably food. The daily lunch tasted very good, and there was also afternoon tea. The crown princess was approachable and had no airs at all. It was very easy to get along with her. The only thing was that Tao Lianyuan in front of him came too frequently, almost every day. Tao Lianyuan took out a storybook from her bosom and placed it on the desk in front of Song Ching. She said in a gentle voice, "Mr. Song, this is the book I finished reading recently. I give it to you." Song Ching looked at the book in front of him and suspected that this might also be a storybook. He declined, "Tao Lianyuan, I'm busy recently and don't have time to read it." Tao Lianyuan should take it back. Tao Lianyuan said indifferently, "I don't have time now, but I will definitely have time in the future. Reading books is not only for learning, but also for leisure. When you are bored, you can read it and relieve your boredom." Song Ching had no reason to refuse, so he had to accept it. Tao Lianyuan walked out happily, but not far away, she saw the crown princess and ran over excitedly. "Crown princess, I sent it out." Shen Chuwei was wiping the stains on her baby daughter's hands. She looked up at Tao Lianyuan in confusion, "What did you send out?" Tao Lianyuan leaned close to Shen Chuwei's ear with excitement and said, "I wrote a love letter and put it in a book to give to Song Ching. Writing a love letter and putting it in a book to give to someone you like is something I learned from storybooks." Shen Chuwei opened her eyes wide, somewhat admiring Tao Lianyuan's courage, who actually wrote a love letter so quickly. "Good night. Baby is begging for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 468. What did you write? Under Shen Chuwei's curious questioning, Tao Liangyuan whispered, "It's a poem. We have to be more reserved. It will definitely scare Songqing if it's too explicit." Shen Chuwei thought it made sense. Songqing was not Xiao Jinyan, the kind of person who could say "I like you" and still be calm. Songqing was easily frightened. Songqing is so smart, he will definitely understand the meaning of the poem. We will know the result by watching his reaction tomorrow. Tao Liangyuan was a little nervous now. It was the first time in her life that she had made such a bold move. She was forced to do nothing. Songqing was so popular that she was snatched away late. Susu looked at the palm of her hand, and there was still a piece of dirt that could not be wiped off. She could only eat after wiping her hands clean, and she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. "Mom, you're dirty inside." Oh, Shenchu responded slightly, lowered his head and continued to wipe the palms of his precious daughter. After wiping them clean, he asked Chengzi to take Susu to eat. Susu held Chengzi's hand and calculated with the other hand, both pots, small pots, nests. Chengzi saw Susu stretching her fingers and calculating, and asked with a smile, "How many fruits do you want?" Hearing this, Susu stretched out a hand with 5 fingers spread out. "I want 5. "Why 5? Chengzi reminded patiently. Susu will do the math carefully. "Brother, Prince Chu, how many tea fruits does Susu want?" Susu clenched her pink fist and said, "Just 5. Chengzi sighed. Susu was still young, so it was normal for her not to be able to count simply. "Okay, 5. After entering, Chengzi brought the tea fruit on the table to Susu. Susu saw Chaguazi, opened the small satchel on her body, took Chaguazi and put it in. The satchel was made by Chengzi, specially for Susu to carry snacks. After filling 3 pieces, Susu took a tea fruit in one hand and walked out. Chengzi hurriedly followed Susu to avoid falling. Although Susu was already 16 months old, she still couldn't walk as steadily as Dao Tao. When they arrived in the study, Susu came to Guo Guo with the tea fruit in her hand and handed the tea fruit in her hand to him. "Guo Guo, second fruit." Dao Tao also likes to eat tea fruit, and naturally he likes it more when his sister gave it to him. He took the tea fruit from his sister's hand and put it to his lips and took a bite. Susu then walked up to Chu Lingfeng with 2 short legs, stood on tiptoes and handed the tea fruit in her hand to him. "Little pot, second fruit." Chu Lingfeng looked at the little princess with beautiful eyes. It had been a while since he came to the East Palace. The little princess often gave him some food. At first, he was a little reserved and embarrassed, but now he has calmed down a lot. "Thank you." He calmly took the tea fruit from the little princess's hand, and was startled when he saw her smile and frown. After Susu delivered the tea fruit, she opened her bag, took out a piece of tea fruit, stuffed it into her mouth and took a bite. It was sweeter than the smile she had just made. Chengzi suddenly understood why Susu insisted on 5, because she wanted to eat 3 herself. Before leaving the palace, Songqing looked at the book in front of him, picked it up out of desperation, put it in his sleeve pocket, and took it home. After returning to Song's house, Songqing came to the bookshelf, took out the book from his sleeve pocket, opened the box, put it together with Yan Chengyi, closed the box, and pushed it into the innermost part. Songqing took back her hand, stared at the black box for a while, then turned and left. The next day, Tao Liangyuan came to the East Palace early, just in time for breakfast, so they ate together. Shen Chuwei saw Tao Liangyuan's behavior and knew that she couldn't wait to know the result. Tao Liangyuan was a little absent-minded. In addition to being eager to know the results, she was also afraid of being rejected or looked down upon. Her identity was there. Even though she said she would leave the palace, she was so unreserved before leaving the palace. Shen Chuwei noticed Tao Liangyuan's absent-mindedness and comforted him, Don't be nervous, I will accompany you later. Tao Lianyuan raised her head and looked at Shen Shuwei, and suddenly she was no longer afraid. There was a saying in the script. If you take the initiative when you meet someone you like, you might get a chance. If you don't take the initiative, you won't even have a chance. No matter what you choose, you will have regrets. It's better to take the initiative once. No regrets. She nodded vigorously, yes. Shen Shuwei put a golden scroll into the bowl in front of Tao Lianyuan. Eat a golden scroll to strengthen your courage. Although Tao Lianyuan looked calm on the surface, she was still a little nervous and worried in her heart. She picked up the gold roll and put it in her mouth and took a bite, as if she had become bolder after eating it. Song Qing came to the East Palace at 6 o'clock every morning to teach Dao Tao, but he came a moment earlier every day. Song Qing was appointed by the emperor to be Dao Tao's first teacher. This is a position that many people want but have no chance. Shen Shuwei and Tao Lianyuan walked in a hurry when they arrived. When they approached the study, they both slowed down and approached the study door. When Chu Lingfeng and Dao Tao walked out of the study, Shen Shuwei asked Chengzi to take them to eat some fruit, then turned to look at Tao Lianyuan. Do you need me to accompany you in? Tao Lianyuan shook her head. No, I'll go in by myself. Shen Chu nodded slightly. Okay, I'll keep watch outside. Come on. Tao Lianyuan mustered up the courage to walk in. Shen Shuwei took out a handful of melon seeds and started cracking them. It would be great if we were in modern times, so we wouldn't have to be sneaky. Tao Lianyuan approached the book table and looked at Song Qing's eyes lowered as she read the book. She couldn't bear to call him. At the same age, Song Qing was well educated and became the youngest prostitute, a man with both talent and appearance. As for her, apart from the money in her family, some of her beauty was gone. Suddenly I felt that I was not worthy of such an outstanding Song Qing. Song Qing saw the purple ribbon when he turned the page. He looked up and saw Tao Lianyuan standing in front of the desk. He quickly put down the book in his hand and stood up to greet her. Tao Lianyuan. Tao Lianyuan looked at Song Qing's usual behavior and felt helpless. He never forgot each other's identity, and he never forgot the etiquette rules. Mr. Song is so serious in reading. Song Qing said slowly, I used to forget the time for meals when I was reading, and I have never changed this habit. Tao Lianyuan smiled secretly with her mouth covered. Then you should marry a wife, and urge you to eat every day, so you won't forget. Song Qing was a little annoyed when he mentioned the topic of marrying a wife, because there were too many people who proposed to him recently, most of them were colleagues, and he didn't know how many times he said no, but they seemed not to hear it, and they mentioned it every time they saw him. He also suggested that we meet for dinner on the 15th of this month. Tao Lianyuan saw that he didn't respond, and approached him in confusion. What's wrong? Song Qing was thinking of a reason to refuse to have dinner together, when he saw a beautiful face very close to him, so close that he could smell her faint fragrance. He had never looked at a woman so closely before, and he instinctively took 2 steps back, but bumped into the chair behind him, making a harsh friction sound. He quickly stabilized himself, lowered his eyebrows and nodded. Nothing, nothing, it's just that I've been worried about a lot of things recently. Tao Lianyuan was a little hurt when she saw his disgusted look, and then looked at Song's expression. Could it be that because he saw the poem, he deliberately kept a distance to tell her that there was no possibility between them? Am I that scary? Why are you hiding from me like this? Song Qing shook his head. Tao Lianyuan is gentle and generous, not a monster. Why should I be afraid? Tao Lianyuan felt better after hearing this. She took out a piece of paper from her sleeve pocket. Mr. Song, this is what I wrote yesterday, can you help me take a look? Song Qing nodded. Okay. Tao Lianyuan handed the paper in her hand to Song Qing, and he took it and looked at the words on it carefully. The handwriting was clean and beautiful, not very good, but not bad. Tao Lianyuan writes well, if you want to improve, you can take some time every day to practice again. Tao Lianyuan was a little happy. She was the daughter of a merchant and went to school, so she could write naturally, mainly for reading the account book. Then I will practice for a while, and Mr. Song will help me look at it. Song Qing replied, okay. Tao Lianyuan seemed to think of something. She said regretfully, when the prince comes back, I will leave the palace. I am afraid I will not see you in the future. Song Qing paused when he heard this, and tried to figure out what Tao Lianyuan meant. Maybe he was afraid that no one would continue to look at her words and correct her in the future. Tao Lianyuan can find a teacher when she leaves the palace in the future, don't worry. Tao Lianyuan. Can't you just say that I can find you when I leave the palace? She sighed secretly. Song Qing really didn't like her at all. It seems that she can only have a crush on him. Thank you Mr. Song for your advice. Tao Lianyuan retracted her gaze and turned to walk out. Song Qing raised his head and looked at Tao Lianyuan's back as she left. He didn't retract his gaze until she walked out, and found that there was only a poem written on the paper in his hand. When Shen Shuwei saw Tao Lianyuan coming out, she put away the melon seeds and went to meet him. How is it? What's his reaction? Tao Lianyuan looked at Shen Shuwei's expectant eyes and sighed, Song Qing doesn't like me at all. Shen Shuwei comforted her, it doesn't matter. There are several kinds of feelings in this world. If you don't fall in love at first sight, then just show your presence and goodwill, show your personal charm, and if that doesn't work, then love will grow over time. Tao Lianyuan shrugged helplessly, the goodwill has been gone since I gave away the book Wild Geese Return. Maybe he thinks I'm that kind of woman. The story of Wild Geese Return is not bad, but it's a little bit on the edge. I think a man like Song Qing who follows the rules needs a woman like you who can break the world, bold and passionate, but with a limit. It will cause people to be disgusted, Shen Shuwei said slowly. Tao Lianyuan felt that there was some truth in what she said. If she didn't succeed, she would die. If Song Qing still didn't like her, then she would give up and could only wish him well. With Shen Shuwei's encouragement, Tao Lianyuan regained her confidence and went to Hehuan Palace again the next day. Chang Lianyuan has been going to Sining Palace or Fenji Palace these days to show her presence and goodwill. On the way, I saw Tao Lianyuan holding a bouquet of flowers and walking towards Hehuan Palace. Hui Xiang looked at Tao Lianyuan's figure and said, my lady, Tao Lianyuan has been very diligent in going to Hehuan Palace recently. She goes there every day and stays there for 2 hours. Tao Lianyuan has always been good friends with Shen Shuwei, but no matter how good they are, she will not go there every day and stay for 2 hours. Is there something wrong? Good evening. Please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 469. The more Chang Lianyuan thought about it, the more she felt that there must be something wrong with Tao Lianyuan. Let's go and take a look. Hui Xiang responded and followed Chang Lianyuan to the direction of Hehuan Palace. From a distance, she saw Tao Lianyuan walking into the prince's bedroom instead of Hehuan Palace. A hint of doubt flashed through Chang Lianyuan's eyes. Xiao Jinyan had been away from the palace for almost 2 months. What was Tao Lianyuan doing in the prince's bedroom? As soon as Chang Lianyuan stepped into the prince's bedroom with doubts, she saw the little princess in the garden sitting on a stone eating. Whenever she saw Shen Shuwei's twins, she couldn't help but feel jealous. She touched her belly. When would she be able to get pregnant and turn over? Xiao Jinyan was not in the palace, so there was no chance to make it. Looking at the little princess on the stone again, jealousy made Chang Lianyuan ignore Susu's cuteness and softness, but hated her like Shen Shuwei, wishing she would disappear. In this way, the emperor and the queen would not always look at them. Jealousy is a flood beast. Once you have an idea, it will take root in your heart. Chang Liangyuan clenched the handkerchief in her hand and walked towards the little princess, then squatted down in front of her. Looking at the little princess who was eating, she took the initiative to ask, "Little princess, where is the crown princess?" Susu took a bite of the purple sweet potato crisp, raised her head, and looked at Chang Liangyuan in front of her with her big watery eyes. Because she was too unfamiliar, she took a glance and ignored it, and continued to eat the purple sweet potato crisp in her hand. Chang Liangyuan secretly gritted her teeth. How can a person so young know how to look at her? The little princess ignored her, and she didn't ask any more questions. This is the prince's bedroom. No matter how disgusted she was, she couldn't do it here. Chang Liangyuan stood up and was about to walk in when she heard the little princess feel, "Hoo-hoo." Just then, a snow-white figure ran over here. Looking closely, she found that it was a white tiger. The white tiger was strong and roared, and the eardrums were buzzing. Chang Liangyuan was so scared that her face turned pale. She stepped back a few steps and accidentally fell to the ground. She stared at the approaching white tiger with wide eyes. Where did the tiger come from? Shen Chuwei heard the low roar of the white tiger and walked out of the house. She saw Chang Liangyuan in the yard from a distance. She frowned. Chang Liangyuan came to the Hehuan palace only a few times a year. What's more, Xiao Jinyan was not in the palace, so she would not come to the prince's bedroom. She has been here for so long and has never liked Chang Liangyuan. Shen Chuwei looked back at the location of the study and suddenly thought of Tao Liangyuan just coming. Chang Liangyuan came right after her. Could it be that she followed Tao Liangyuan? Chang Liangyuan was so scared that she couldn't go in. With the help of Weixiang, she left the prince's bedroom in a panic. After leaving the bedroom, Chang Liangyuan looked back and felt that there was something wrong inside. And how could there be a tiger in the East Palace? Who raised the tiger? After seeing Chang Liangyuan leave, Shen Chuwei retracted her gaze and returned to the door of the study. She saw Tao Liangyuan standing in front of the desk, watching Song Qing write. The scene was very warm. Tao Liangyuan still came every day, and every day she would show her presence in front of Song Qing, but there was no progress. The queen had been accompanying the queen mother to worship Buddha during this period, and finally had free time. She planned to go to the East Palace to visit her precious grandchildren. Before she walked out of Fenji Palace, she saw the dog emperor coming. He walked hurriedly, as if he had something urgent. She stepped forward and bowed, "Your Majesty." The emperor stepped forward and took the queen's hand, and walked into the bedroom. "Queen, I have something to tell you." The relationship between the emperor and the queen eased a lot, but the emperor knew that the queen still had a knot in her heart. And the queen did not hear what he said that night. Maybe it was because he was the king of a country and he was good at face, so when the queen was awake, he couldn't say it. The dog emperor had always been calm and composed, and suddenly showed such an expression, which made the queen have a bad premonition. "What's the matter?" After the emperor led the queen in, he dismissed the maids and eunuchs. When only he and the queen were left, he spoke, "The prince is missing." Although the queen did not have a good relationship with her eldest son, and because of childhood events, they had a rift, but after all, she gave birth to her youngest son after 10 months of pregnancy, and she was the one who brought him to birth. If it weren't for the eldest son pushing the youngest son, causing him to almost lose his life, there would be no rift between them. Why is the prince missing? The news from the front line said that the prince won consecutive victories on the battlefield. The most recent time, the prince was defeated by a master invited from somewhere by the Snow Moon Kingdom, causing him to fall off a cliff. He has not been found yet. The emperor made Xiao Jinyan the prince because he saw Xiao Jinyan's ability. He was the strongest among all the princes. He suddenly disappeared and his life or death was unknown. He was heartbroken not only because of the father and son, but also because of cherishing talent. The queen said anxiously, "Then send more people to look for him." The crown princess, Dao Tao, and Susu are all waiting for his triumphant return. I have sent people to tell them that they must find the crown prince. They must find him alive or dead. The Imperial Observatory has calculated the fate of the crown prince, and he is not a short-lived person. The emperor was for the Imperial Observatory and firmly believed that his son was still alive. Don't tell the crown princess about this for the time being. If she knew that the crown prince fell off the cliff, how sad she would be. The queen herself was in great pain, let alone the crown princess. The emperor hugged the queen in his arms and stroked her back soothingly. "I know, I have asked those who know to keep their mouths shut. The queen doesn't need to worry too much. Yanar is the crown prince and the future emperor. He will definitely be out of danger." Perhaps the emperor's comfort worked, and the queen suddenly felt more at ease. She nodded. "I know, the crown prince will be fine." The emperor said quietly, "Yanar has been working hard these years and has not let me down. She will not let me down this time either." The queen said softly, "I am planning to visit Susu. I haven't seen her for a few days and I miss her very much." "I haven't seen Susu for a few days either. I don't know if Susu will say more." Since the prince led the army to the battle, the emperor has been busy. He goes to Fenji Palace later and later at night. Sometimes he is busy until late at night and can only rest in Yangzin Palace. Naturally, he misses Susu and wants to hear Susu call him grandpa. Every time he hears Susu call grandpa to hold the baby, his heart becomes very soft. After the emperor left, the queen went to the East Palace. The mighty guard of honor was very conspicuous wherever she went. Chang Liangyuan was about to go to Fenji Palace. Before leaving the East Palace, she saw the queen's guard of honor. The queen only went to one place when she came to the East Palace, and that was the Hehuan Palace. Last time, Behu didn't go in. Now that the queen is here, it's different. She can go in with the queen and see what shameful things Tao Liangyuan and Shen Chuwei have. Chang Liangyuan smiled and went to meet him, bowing, "Aunt." The queen looked at Chang Liangyuan and asked in a lukewarm tone, "Where are you going?" Chang Liangyuan said softly, "Lanner originally wanted to visit Aunt, but I didn't expect to meet her halfway." "Are you going to visit the little princess?" The queen said, "I haven't seen Susu for a few days, so of course I have to visit her." Chang Liangyuan took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, "Then Lanner will go with you." Last time, Lanner originally wanted to visit, but she couldn't get in. The queen frowned. "What are you going to do?" The crown princess gave birth to 2 children, and His Highness led the army to war. At least she has 2 children to accompany her, but Lanner has no one around her. Her life is too dull, so she wants to go see the little princess, Chang Liangyuan said, and felt wronged. The queen heard that her niece had been in the palace for 3 or 4 years, and she had been alone in an empty room. No woman could stand it. Seeing others have children, she naturally wanted to have children herself. She was a woman, and she could better understand the difficulties of women. But the prince only had Shen Chuwei in his heart. Lanner was afraid that it would be a waste of time if she continued to stay in the palace. It would be better for her to leave the palace and marry someone else like concubine Su. "Then let's go together." Chang Liangyuan smiled happily, "Yes, Aunt." The queen and Chang Liangyuan followed the honor guard to the Hehuan Palace. At this time, Tao Liangyuan stood in front of Song Qing, watching him write seriously, and taught her how to write well. These were taught in her free time. And her eyes stayed on Song Qing's face, staring at his profile in a daze, until Song Qing raised his head and looked at her. She didn't react. Song Qing found that Tao Liangyuan had been staring at his face. He coughed lightly. "Tao Liangyuan." Ah, Tao Liangyuan was stunned for a moment, guilty and flustered, accidentally sweeping the ink stick to the ground, and the ink splashed on the skirts of the 2. I didn't mean it. The two of them bent down to pick up the ink stick on the ground almost at the same time. Seeing that the other party squatted down, Song Qing subconsciously turned away, but they still couldn't avoid colliding with each other. When they brushed against the soft lips, the soft touch was no less than an electric shock, and both of them were stunned. Outside the door, the Queen's guard of honor passed by the prince's bedroom. Chang Liangyuan glanced at the prince's bedroom. Huaixiang had been watching these days. Knowing that Tao Liangyuan went to the prince's bedroom every day, she reminded her, and, the crown princess is probably not in the Hehuan palace now, but in the prince's bedroom. The queen felt that what Chang Liangyuan said made sense. Dao Tao and Prince Chu were studying in the study room in the prince's bedroom. The study room was specially prepared for Dao Tao and was larger than Xiao Jinyan's study room. It was probably also at this time, so she ordered someone to go in. After the queen went in, she went straight to the study room. Chang Liangyuan was proud in her heart. There was no eunuch shouting when the queen came in. It was just right for her to see what Shen Chuwei and Tao Liangyuan were doing. Good night, babies. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 470. Chapter 470, Caught red-handed in an affair? The wife slave shows it vividly. Susu held the biscuit in her hand and just took a bite when she saw Grandma Huang coming, and happily rushed towards Grandma Huang. Nana. Xiaobai also ran over with Susu. Xiaobeiju was like Susu's follower. Wherever Susu went, he would follow him and never leave. The queen saw Susu from a distance and saw her running towards her. She couldn't help but worry a little, fearing that she would fall. Susu is unsteady when walking and falls easily when running. The last time she fell, her little hands were red, which made her feel bad. She didn't care about the queen's manners and ran to meet her. Susu, slow down, don't fall. Chang Liangyuan followed behind, looking at the queen's worried behavior, and clenched the handkerchief in her hand. When she was a child, the queen had never been so nervous about her. Susu ran to the queen and stretched out her hand to hug her. Nana, hold the baby. Okay, the queen bent down and picked up Susu. It was a bit difficult to hold Susu due to her weight, and it was not as easy as when she was about 1 year old. But who wants her precious granddaughter? You have to hug it even if you can't hold it, otherwise no matter how big it is, you won't be able to hold it. Susu pouted and gave Grandma Wang's cheek a smack, her eyebrows arched with a smile. Nana. The queen looked at her baby granddaughter's actions and smiled. What are you eating? Susu raised the cookie in her hand and shook it proudly. Biscuit, good time. The biscuits were made by Shen Chu Wajiao Chengzi. They were specially made with milk. They were low in sugar and very crispy. I especially liked them. The queen looked at her chubby little face, smiled and joked, be careful and eat it until you become a little fat ball. Susu took a bite of the biscuit and said in a sweet voice, Kaiokyu, it's fun. Chang Liangyuan didn't understand why her aunt liked the little princess so much. When she saw the white tiger following the little princess, she was still very scared, but seeing that her aunt didn't seem to be afraid of the white tiger, she took a few steps forward and reminded her, Aunt, the sun is a bit strong outside, please go inside. The queen looked at Susu's little face that was flushed by the sun, nodded, hugged Susu and walked to the study. Chang Liangyuan followed immediately, fearing that she would be knocked down and torn to pieces by Baihu if she fell behind. When they got closer, Chang Liangyuan looked at Dao Tao and Chu Lingfeng playing at the door. She sneered and suddenly understood why Tao Liangyuan always ran here, because Tan Hualang was here. Tao Liangyuan must have been unable to bear the loneliness and wanted to hook up with Tan Hualang. At this moment, there was only Tan Hua in the study, and Tao Liangyuan was not outside. She was alone, and she might have done something deviant in a place where no one could see her. She smiled and looked at the queen, and, I heard that the person who will serve as Dao Tao's first teacher is this year's newly promoted third flower. I have also heard about this matter. I heard that the newly promoted Tan Hualang is the youngest Tan Hualang. He is only 19 years old. He is a rare talent. The queen hasn't seen them yet, so she took this opportunity to visit Susu and Dao Tao. When Chu Lingfeng saw the queen coming, he bowed first and said, "I send my regards to the queen. May the queen be blessed with peace and happiness." Dao Tao hadn't seen Grandma Huang for a few days, so she was so happy that she forgot to salute, and took 2 steps forward to pull the queen's sleeve. "Nana." The queen knelt down, put Susu down, and pinched Dao Tao's little face. Her cheeks were not as fleshy as Susu's, but they were still soft. "Dao Tao, are you tired from studying?" Dao Tao shook her head. "Wo likes it?" Chang Liangyuan glanced around but didn't see Tao Liangyuan and Song Tanhua, so she asked Chu Lingfeng, "Where is Song Tanhua?" Chu Lingfeng replied, "Mr. Song is in the study." Chang Liangyuan turned to look at the queen and reminded her specifically, "And, do you want to go take a look?" "Go in and take a look." The queen held Dao Tao in one hand and Susu in the other, and walked into the study. Chang Liangyuan couldn't wait to follow. When he walked into the study, he saw 2 people standing inside, sorting out their clothes. When they found someone coming in, both of them were stunned for a moment. Chang Liangyuan saw Tao Liangyuan standing with a handsome man. Judging from his actions, he must be adjusting his clothes. The handsome man, whose face looked a bit green, must be Tan Hualang. No wonder Tao Liangyuan comes here every day. Tan Hualang does have the capital to attract people. Chang Liangyuan pretended to be surprised and asked, "Tao Liangyuan, why are you here?" Then she pointed at them, as if she had discovered something terrible. "What are you doing in the study alone?" When Chang Liangyuan spoke, she deliberately raised her voice for fear that others would not hear her. When the queen saw Tao Liangyuan and Song Qing standing so close, doubts flashed in her eyes. "What are you doing?" After Tao Liangyuan panicked, she stepped forward and saluted, "I would like to say hello to the queen. May the queen be blessed with peace and prosperity. I am asking Mr. Song for advice on how to write good calligraphy." Song Qing lowered his head and closed his eyes. "I send my regards to the queen. May the queen be blessed with peace and happiness. I just saw you messing around, it doesn't look like you are learning to write. What's more, there are differences between men and women. When you are alone in a room, it's hard not to make people suspicious of you." After Chang Liangyuan finished speaking, she looked at the queen, and, "Do you think Lanner is right?" The queen frowned. "Chang Liangyuan is right. How can you, a man and a woman, be alone in the same room? It's hard not to misunderstand if you are still arguing. The Empress has misunderstood. I really studied calligraphy with Mr. Song, and it's not just me, but also the Crown Princess." Chang Liangyuan sneered. "Tao Liangyuan, do you think we are blind? It's obvious that you and Tanhua are acting ambiguously. Could it be because His Highness is leading the troops on an expedition and Tao Liangyuan can't bear the loneliness?" Tao Liangyuan retorted, "Chang Liangyuan, if there is no evidence, you can't steal someone's blood." Chang Liangyuan looked at Song Qing, who lowered his head and said nothing. She knew at a glance that she had a guilty conscience and a bad look in her eyes. She fell in love with Tao Liangyuan and even cost her own life. The queen caught her red-handed. "Do you still need evidence?" After Chang Liangyuan finished speaking, she sneered again. "Who doesn't know that Tao Liangyuan never had the chance to sleep with her after entering the East Palace? The man who visited the flower shop was so handsome, Tao Liangyuan couldn't hold it back for a while. Fortunately, the queen and I came at the right time, otherwise if a man and a woman are alone in a room, they should be hugged together by now, right?" Chang Liangyuan's thoughts are really dirty. Shen Shuwei slowly stood up from the ground and put the rice paper in her hand on the desk. Chang Liangyuan was stunned for a moment when she saw Shen Shuwei suddenly appearing. Why was Shen Shuwei here? Why Xiangming only saw Tao Liangyuan come in, but not Shen Shuwei? Shen Shuwei took a few steps forward to bless his body and said, "My mother, may you be blessed with peace and happiness." When the queen saw Shen Shuwei, she smiled and said, "It turns out that the crown princess is here too. Mr. Song's handwriting is so good that I and Tao Liangyuan are both ashamed of themselves." They wanted to take advantage of the break to ask Mr. Song for advice. Unexpectedly, Shen Chu slightly raised his head and looked at Chang Liangyuan. Unexpectedly, Chang Liangyuan has such a dirty mind. Does she really suspect that my concubine is having an affair with Mr. Song? Chang Liangyuan immediately retorted, "I didn't say that you had an affair with Mr. Song. I said that Tao Liangyuan was having an affair with Song Qing, which was inappropriate." Tao Liangyuan said, "Shouldn't Chang Liangyuan salute the crown princess when she sees her? They say Chang Liangyuan is well versed in etiquette. How come she doesn't even understand the most basic etiquette?" Chang Liangyuan's expression changed. Due to her status, she stepped forward to say, "I'd like to pay my respects to the crown princess." Shen Shuwei then continued to ask, "Which of your eyes saw Tao Liangyuan and Mr. Song fighting? They insist that they have an affair, and Chang Liangyuan will still try the case as the young minister of Dali Temple." Chang Liangyuan was speechless when asked. He turned to look at the queen and defended, "And, I just have doubts. Besides, what I told is the truth. His Highness is not in the East Palace now, and Tao Liangyuan has never slept with him." The queen interrupted her next words, "Okay, haven't you never been to bed before? Do you also have such thoughts?" In front of outsiders, Chang Liangyuan said that she had never slept with him before. Chang Liangyuan's face looked a little ugly, and she couldn't show it no matter how unhappy she felt. "Of course Lanner has no such intention, The queen was a little impatient and interrupted her again, "That's enough. Always pay attention to evidence in everything. Don't just insist that others have done something bad when you see it." Chang Liangyuan pursed her lips, feeling unwilling but not daring to talk back. Looking at Shen Shuwei and Tao Liangyuan, neither one was a good person. The queen was pretending that she couldn't tell Shen Shuwei about the prince's disappearance for fear that she would be anxious, so she played with Susu and Dao Tao for a while before returning to Fenji Palace. Shen Shuwei personally sent the queen out. After everyone left, Tao Liangyuan raised her head and looked at Song Qing, her eyes full of apologies. "Mr. Song, it was all my fault just now. I almost hurt you." Song Qing recalled what happened just now. He had never been in contact with a woman before, and he didn't react for a long time. He didn't mistakenly feel that his lips touched Tao Liangyuan's lips just now. When she thought of this, Song Qing hurriedly took a few steps back, bowed and saluted, "Tao Liangyuan, what just happened was just an accident, we pretend it didn't happen." Tao Liangyuan looked at Song Qing's deliberate alienation. If Shen Shuwei hadn't appeared in time just now, they might not have been able to escape by jumping into the Yellow River. And she did have such thoughts. Although she didn't do anything extraordinary, she did cross the line. He almost got into trouble with Song Qing. "I understand. There have been many interruptions recently, causing trouble to Mr. Song." After Tao Liangyuan finished speaking, she turned and left. Song Qing lowered his eyebrows and lowered his eyes. It was not until he walked out of the study that he raised his head and looked at the door. After Shen Shuwei saw off the queen, he turned around and saw Tao Liangyuan when she came back. She went up to meet her. "How's it going?" Tao Liangyuan sighed helplessly, "It's too dangerous. My current status really shouldn't be too close to Song Qing. I'm lucky this time. If someone deliberately adds jealousy next time, I'm afraid Song Qing will be hurt." Shen Chu nodded slightly in agreement. "There are many people in the palace, and it is indeed very dangerous for your current identity to be discovered. You can only regain your freedom after leaving the palace. I plan to leave the palace when His Highness comes back. However, Song Qing is so outstanding. I'm afraid he will be snatched away by others before then. Even if he waits, Song Qing may not like a woman like me. During the few years that Tao Liangyuan stayed in the palace, she read so many story books, but she was still clear-headed and self-aware. She is not outstanding, and her beauty is not outstanding in the palace. The only thing she is good at is reading account books and calculating accounts. Shen Chuwei nodded again in agreement. I'll find someone to help you. Tao Liangyuan asked in confusion, who can help me? Shen Chu said softly, Prince Yu. The next day, Shen Chuwei asked someone to call Xiao Jinyu over. After Xiao Jinyu got married, he became a veritable wife-slave. Before going out, he had to report to his wife. Ayan, my sister-in-law asked me to go to the East Palace for something. Miss Han had been feeling sleepy recently. When she saw Xiao Jinyu lying beside the bed, her handsome face had lost its childishness and become a bit more mature. Good evening, babies. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets.